Quick legal question. Something very important for this week's parasha of Shoftim, which is, not only about the appointing of judges or magistrates, but about the overall pursuit of justice, as we could say in Torah, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice, justice, you will pursue. Well, when we pursue justice in Judaism, there are a number of basic principles that need to be followed, much like in American law, where we have such a thing as innocent until proven guilty, trial by peers, etc., etc. One of the fundamental principles in Jewish law is that a matter cannot be established except by the testimony of two witnesses. That a single witness is not enough to convict a person. If I go to the authorities, in the ancient world it would have been the Beit Din, headed up by the rabbis and the officers, and said, I saw Mr. Plony kill Mr. Cohen. Sorry, we don't have any other witnesses to this. There's no way to establish this with any certainty, and there is no way to prosecute a person based solely on the testimony of one person. Which means, of course, that ideally, if you're going to murder someone, do it alone. Make sure that there aren't any witnesses. Now, you may be thinking, but wait a minute, couldn't I and my friend get together and say, we saw Mr. Plony kill Mr. Cohen? And if that is all the evidence that is needed, then doesn't that mean any two people could conspire to send an innocent person to their death? If it was established according to Jewish law, then they would be subject to capital punishment. Don't worry, Shoftim has already thought of this for you. If you are lying, conspiring witnesses, if you are plotting to get poor Mr. Plony in trouble, if it is established that you are lying on your testimony, not merely mistaken, but actively lying, then Plony goes off the hook and you get put onto it. One of those other principles in Jewish law is that if you are found to be a deceptive witness, then whatever it was that would have happened to the person had your testimony been valid will happen to you instead. Make sure we understand that, right? If I am testifying in a case where the penalty might be 100 shekels and I am a liar, then it turns out that I will be paying a 100 shekel penalty. If I am testifying as a liar in a case where the penalty is death, then I will be executed for my false testimony. This is not like American law, where perjury will come with just sort of a standard punishment, more or less, slightly scaling, but there is no way that perjury would ever be considered a capital crime within the American legal system, even in the worst of situations. But that is because Judaism holds witness testimony as being paramount because, well, up until very, very recently, that was the only evidence we really had. How else? We didn't have CSI to come along and investigate what had happened. There were no police procedurals from us to learn the way to carry out such investigations, no techniques that were at our disposal. The best that we could manage was to vigorously cross-examine witnesses or potential suspects. But if we didn't get testimony, then nothing would happen. And if we got false testimony, the entire thing would fall apart. Therefore, a penalty for false testimony has to be very extreme as well. Everybody following so far? Okay. Anybody spot the flaw in the problem? Well, what about all those situations where we don't get two witnesses, where we don't have double testimony? Aren't there going to be many problems in society? If I say that he owes me 100 shekels because I loaned it to him last week and he said he'd pay me back, and he says, nuh-uh, and we don't have any other witnesses that were there when we were making that arrangement, then I'm out 100 shekels because there's no way for the court to force him to pay it back to me. However, says our tradition, if there was one witness, well, it's still not enough, because we don't have two, to compel him to pay me back, but one witness would be sufficient to obligate him to swear an oath, to take an oath with God's name, that indeed he does not owe me. Now, most people might be casually comfortable lying, but swearing by God's name, well, that was taken much more seriously in our classical life. And therefore, he might be loath to swear by God's name a lie that he would otherwise be willing to say in front of the community. People had a little more respect for God back then. No offense putting you on the hook here. And so that one witness couldn't be enough to compel him, but it could be enough to give me at least the opportunity to adjure him, to force him to take that oath. And that might be enough to get the guy to pay up like he's supposed to. But it also works the other way. There are times when one witness can sometimes free a person. And I don't mean coming in the last minute and saying, stop, I have testimony. I mean one of the more difficult situations in Judaism, which is where somebody is missing. If a husband goes off on a business trip, which back in those days was not as simple as going down to MCO, but instead involved rather dangerous travel, either by caravan or by ship, well, if he was gone, as would often be the case for a lengthy period of time, nothing would be suspected. But after a while, a year, maybe longer, he still hadn't come back, well, his wife is now beginning to think that something has happened to him. But with no evidence, she is left still married to this phantom, to this man who has disappeared, which means she is not allowed to remarry, because to do so while married to the disappearing man would constitute adultery. This is the situation known as being an aguna. She is anchored to the vanished person, and thus she is not free to chart her own course. But, says our tradition, along comes one witness who says, no, I saw Mr. Plony. I saw him go down with the ship. There was a horrible storm. He went down. I made it back, but it's taken me this long to return home, and I can tell you he died. Well, there aren't two witnesses to his death, just the one. But because there was already his absence testifying to the potential for his departure, we accept the testimony of one person that indeed Mr. Plony has passed away. We then free his wife, and she is allowed to continue in her life, charting the course that she will. Yes?
Rabbi, on that situation, doesn't there have to be some showing that the trip he went on had some high level of danger?
Well, it doesn't have to have that the trip itself. There has to have been a reason. If the man says there was a storm, if there was, a pirate attack, there was something, all of the trips in the ancient world were considered dangerous a priori. In fact, that is why, as a little aside, it used to be that every time you return from a trip, whether it be caravan or a cruise, you would bench gomel. You would say a special blessing that we have every time we also come out of the hospital, because of the life-threatening nature of those issues, that just being on a boat was considered life-threatening. And thus you would thank God for delivering you from the dangers of that travel. So, one witness can sometimes force an oath, can sometimes free somebody that is shackled. But didn't we say we needed two witnesses? Well, yes, that is the general principle. That is the standard rule. But standard rules are not universal rules. That there are certain circumstances, certain situations, there are different details of different particular cases that sometimes allow for a mitigation of the one versus two or more witnesses kind of rules. Why? Because tzedek tirdof, because justice is pursued. It is not a simple algorithm that we can plug into a computer or modern large language model AI systems, where once you've entered in the information, you can hit the button, it will follow the rules perfectly in a formula and spit out the just answer. But instead, it is nuanced and it is something we must wrestle with. It is something that we must chase after. Sometimes that means, in very rare cases, that single witness can be enough between justice served or justice denied. We stick to the two witness principle in general, but occasionally it is important to speak up as a single witness. in our own day and age, sometimes that single witness can bring information to the authorities and set a chain of events into action that will, through proper, just policing or other investigatory techniques, yield additional evidence which can bring to light a particular crime or a path to just resolution. And that is perfectly fine. What is not okay is for one person to be a witness to their friends about the gossip they wish to share. If you feel that you are privy to some information that can lead to justice, by all means, even as a single person, share it with the authorities. Perhaps they can find other witnesses to corroborate or other evidence with our modern techniques. But by no means do we share that with just the neighbor or the person in the cubicle next to us at work, because we think of it as juicy gossip, because we pursue justice. We do not pursue the sharing of those types of tales. Shabbat Shalom.